Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
She's a very resilient person and, she has convictions. So I just think it's interesting to hear what she has to say and what her reflections are on what's happened recently. It means that she was right, because it was 2 years after Margaret Thatcher was deposed. I was in Blackpool and there was a queue around the block to see her as well.
I know Liz Truss wasn't great with the economy, however, to my opinion, that was most at fault of the Bank of England that did that.
Well, those were supporters of Liz Truss speaking to Bloomberg. It has to be said, she's been the star of the show, it seems, at Conservative Party conference. The party says it's seeking a new direction, but are they really haunted by ghosts of Prime Ministers past? You're listening to the Bloomberg UK Politics podcast live from the Conservative Party conference here in Birmingham. I'm Lizzy Burden.
And I'm James Woolcock. Welcome to the programme. Now, Lizzy, I was out at that queue talking to those Conservative Party members who went to see Liz. You said it was the main event. I would go further. I would say that was possibly the most well-attended event of conference so far, with the leader speeches yet to happen tomorrow. Everyone here is trying to get a handle on what is the vision of these four new leadership candidates. How will they take the fight to Labour? What will they push back on? What will this new Conservatism look like? And yet you have, on one hand, Liz trying to redefine what the past looks like. On the other hand, on Thursday, right after conference, you'll have Boris Johnson publish his memoirs. And so this is a party that hasn't yet finished reckoning with its own past, trying to also paint the vision for its future at the same time.
How different it is that Liz Truss and Boris Johnson should make these appearances when Rishi Sunak quietly makes his speech on the Sunday and vacates the floor for the four leadership candidates. Well, speaking of whom, I sat down with the former Foreign and Home Secretary, now Conservative leadership hopeful, James Cleverly. And I have to say, the serious pitch to business has not been what's been dominating the agenda here. It's been mostly about the culture wars and immigration, but James Cleverly admitted to me that yes, his party dropped the ball, yes, business cares more about influencing the government than the opposition, and that's evident from the poor showing of CEOs here. We report that they had to give away tickets to Business Day, and those tickets had been on sale for £3,500, although an official denied it. But look, as Cleverly told me, what they need to do now is win back trust. Take a listen to James Cleverly.
I'm putting myself forward to be the next Conservative Prime Minister of this country. So it is now it's not just appropriate, but I am duty bound to set out my vision.
And what's that?
So my vision is a more productive economy. We have regulated ourselves to be a less productive economy than many of our international competitors. That has got to change. We are too highly taxed compared with many of our international competitors. That has got to change. So less tax, less red tape. We've also got to make sure we are properly defended, which is why I'm committed to 3% of defence spending. And also, when I say less tax, I don't just mean nibbling away at margins, which is really important. I want to make sure we send a message, both domestically and internationally, that Britain is open for business. We're going to build. We're going to get our economy firing again. We're going to do that by taking the limiters away to unlock potential, both in individuals and in British-based businesses. We've got to get the energy back, optimism, positivity, but some real energy, and that will attract international investors and support British workers.
Just to go back to defence, since you say it's central to your vision, is the UK government doing enough to extract those British citizens from Lebanon?
Well, when I was Foreign Secretary, I changed the travel advice to advise people not to go to Lebanon. The British government has been telling people for weeks they should leave Lebanon. The point is, it may well be, it is quite likely to be impossible to do a facilitated evacuation from Lebanon. This is why we tell people to leave. If people don't leave, we can't guarantee that we can get them out, which is why we told them to leave in the first place.
OK. And you say that economics is going to be at the heart of your vision. I was listening to Liz Truss yesterday. She said she hadn't seen any evidence that any of you running for the Tory leadership really understand why things are so bad for the Conservatives. Is she right?
I'm a really good friend of Liz. She was a good boss when she was Foreign Secretary.
She's not backed you. She's not backed anyone.
No, she's not backed anyone. Which I understand. None of the former Prime Ministers have backed the leadership candidates, and that makes perfect sense. I don't always agree with Liz, and I don't agree with her on this case. I am setting out a very, very clear agenda, which is to ease the tax burden on both businesses and individuals to really get activity back in the UK economy. I want to push for greater productivity, particularly when excessive regulation is stifling that productivity. I want to make sure that we defend ourselves properly. 3% is an upturn from where we are at the moment, but 3% on defence is considerably less expensive than going to war. Ukraine is spending 40% of its GDP on defending itself. 3% is cheap, and creating a safe environment is good for British people, good for British business.
Was Trump right on NATO?
Well, look, I've been advocating that all NATO members spend at least that 2%. I speak to friends in Eastern Europe who are literally bordering Russia, and they are crying out for all NATO members to spend the 2%, which is a commitment. That Carroll Bay commitment is really, really key. I've always said that. I want to go further. I'm going to spend 3% of GDP on defence. And,
you talk about business regulation, cutting red tape, and yet there are very few CEOs here. Why do you think they've abandoned the party?
Well, we've got to recognise that we're not in government anymore. Of course, people want to influence the party of government, and because we dropped the ball, that is not us. We need to win back the ear of British business, British voters, British people. I know that I am best placed to do that. That is why I am running, and that is why I know I'd be the best leader of the opposition and ultimately take us back into government and become Prime Minister.
Do you worry that Kemi Badenoch's comments on maternity pay are going to put women off the party?
Well, they shouldn't. This is a party that has had not one, not two, but three female prime ministers. We promote on merit. I very much, and I've made this point, I really value the embedded talent in working women, and those who want to go back to work should be able to do so. The cost of childcare, as I say, is putting a lot of them off. That's what I want to tackle, so that everyone in society, whether you're a parent or not, can play an active part in the economy, and that will remain a priority for me.
But just finally, some of the briefing against Kemi Badenoch's been pretty toxic. Are you, Tom Tugendhat and Robert Jenrick colluding against her? No. I've made it absolutely clear in my campaign right from the start that we would run an optimistic and positive campaign. I said anyone in my team involved in blue on blue is off the team. No yellow card, no second chance, you're off the team. I intend to campaign as I intend to lead, as I intend to govern, which is by putting the best foot forward, being optimistic, promoting my values and my ideas, and not talking down any of my friends, because every single one of these other candidates is not just a colleague, but also a friend. That was the Shadow Home Secretary and Tory leadership candidate James Cleverly. James, look, he's in a difficult position. All of them are. You've got to please your fellow MPs to get on the ballot paper. You've got to please the Tory grassroots to win the vote. And then to win over the electorate eventually to become Prime Minister, you've got to thread this very delicate needle. And clearly Cleverly's rivals Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are focused on the grassroots for now. They're more right-wing than him and Tom Tugendhat. But interestingly, YouGov's Patrick English came on Bloomberg Radio with us earlier, and he said that it's not necessarily the best strategy because this is still an open race. But it raises a question. Who's the real James Cleverly? He served under Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. So what is Cleverlyism? He says it's about having a positive message, a more productive economy, less red tape, lower taxes for individuals and businesses. He wants more childcare and more house building. But when I spoke to him, he wasn't willing to relax migration rules to provide those things. So is it all just warm words?
See, you ask what is Cleverlyism. I think you could quite fairly ask what is Badenochism, Kemiism, what is Jenrickism, what is Tugendhatism. I think the problem a lot of them have here at this conference is outside of the Conservative bubble. Most of the general public do not know what they are and what they stand for. I mean, for those of you who are listening in, broadly, to really simplify them, you have Robert Jenrick wants to tackle immigration, ECHR. Kemi Badenoch is a classic libertarian. She thinks there is too much nanny state. She wants to cut back on regulation on business. Like Lizzy said in that big interview there, Cleverly is the unity candidate who wants sort of an optimism around the party, and Tugendhat is a centrist with sort of a tough line on security. Now, the problem is, though, any opposition is going to be defined by what happens in government. And like everyone else, they are all waiting for this UK big budget that Rachel Reeves is going to be setting out in just 6 weeks' time to actually say what they're against. Because in many ways, this is the last moment they have, Lizzy, to actually define themselves as leaders. I don't know, did you get the sense from your Cleverly interview that that's what he's doing? Is there a big, bold vision? Is there sort of big policy acts? Is there a way they want to... is there even an answer to Liz Truss's question at her event of what went wrong for the past few years?
I think that James Cleverly is more realistic about the fact that something went wrong for the Conservatives, and then they need to own that. I think the political consensus post Liz Truss is that economic growth needs to be the top priority, but I haven't heard more specific policy measures here than I heard at Labour, and that's the problem. The problem is that we've got this policy vacuum, and what everybody wants, especially the markets, especially business, is detail, and at the moment we're in a vacuum. But
then I'm not sure business really would mind what the Conservatives say. We've been talking to some of the big sort of business leaders here at conference. Siobhan Haviland from the British Chamber of Commerce was saying that there are businesses here, but they are not sending the CEOs, they're sending their public affairs representatives. They are building relationships, but not necessarily yet thinking about policy. They are waiting to see if there's a leader, and frankly also waiting to see if this leader is going to be a leader that sticks around in time for the next election. All I would caution everyone who is watching these leadership elections and wondering what might come of them is, 5 years ago, people were wondering what would come after Jeremy Corbyn and wondering if Labour will be out of power for a decade. And now here we are with Labour having their largest landslide majority in 15 years and the ability to reshape the country as they wish. So I think for many people, including Patrick English from YouGov, who we talked to this morning, politics is more volatile. Things can all change. And in 5 years' time, one of the 4 people speaking tomorrow at their big leader speeches might be in charge of the country.
It's very true. Politics is fickle, especially in the UK. But look, for now, as we report on Bloomberg this morning, business chiefs are the most pessimistic they have been about Britain's economy since late 2022. The last time we were here, James, in this arena in Birmingham, when the country was reeling from the effects of Liz Truss's spell as Prime Minister. So we've been through a lot in the economy, and somebody needs to inject some optimism. That's what James Cleverly has been trying to do. I also just want to note, on the geopolitical front, we've had the enormous news that Israel has invaded Lebanon, and Cleverly says he backs the Israeli incursion after those Hezbollah rocket attacks. He says, though, it must be in line with international law. Can that line hold the more the incursion continues, as the risk of retaliation from Iran increases and as the gap from US policy widens? It's a story we will monitor as the leadership race continues.
And I guess we'll be seeing in those speeches tomorrow, if you have Jenrick, Tugendhat and Badenoch also coming out with these comments on foreign policy as they try and stake out what this party means. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars so other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo and our audio engineer was Sean Guastamakia. I'm Lizzy Burden.
And I'm James Woolcock. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.